Hello.
Morning. Well, today we're here to discuss the future of work. And there is no doubt that the decade is off to an unusual start. Health, societies, economies are requiring radical rethinking. And that is why you're here today, because we want to hear how you, as brand innovators, are thinking about these massive cultural transitions. Whether you're in Berlin or Tokyo, some of the most resilient workplaces are having to adapt and change to new contexts and new conditions. And in a moment of crisis, we're also in a moment of total innovation and rethinking the way that we work. And so we'll talk about how design can lead that transition for industries across the world and dig into how you're thinking about it at Ford and Gensler. So now that I've set it up, let me give some proper introductions. So Jennifer is the Global Design Director at Ford Motor Company with design oversight on Ford's physical environments. Her role seeks to unify Ford's brand language across typologies through architecture and design, investigating opportunities for cultural and behavioral change, elevating design impact through internal and external to the global Ford ecosystem. With a core belief in collaboration, her mission is to ideate future state readiness for physical infrastructure of the next generation for this mobility company. And I think what's so interesting about that is she's thinking about the future. And I think there's sort of a medium state with where we are right now and where Jennifer's head is at. So I'm really excited to ask her some questions. We also have Amy with us, and Amy is the global lead at Gensler's brand design practice, and she's working with clients on brand expression within physical environments. Her work focuses on delivering exceptional brand experiences through the integration of environmental graphic design and signage with interior design and architecture, a really multidisciplinary practice. She collaborates with clients across industries to develop consumer experiences, employee experiences, and community experiences. And she views future of work as a hybridization of all three. So welcome, Amy. Welcome, Jennifer. Thanks for joining today. So the first question I have, teeing it up to the state of the world, is we're in a critical moment that is calling on us to address the immediate needs of our people while simultaneously reimagining the future. And we're having to work in very short-term and long-term time horizons. How are you as brand innovators thinking about the future of work in the light of our current situation? And Jen, I thought maybe you could take the first question.
You started with a big question. You kind of started with the question. So listen, if you're getting feedback from me, let me know, and I'll see if I can adjust, because like all things COVID, there are other things going on in the house.
You sound great right now, Jen.
Does it sound bad?
You're good.
No, it sounds perfect.
Okay, thanks, guys. So you kind of hinted at it, Michelle, which is that we are trying to construct a realistic framework or a way to think into this. We've got our now, our near, and our far. So the now is, everything in this safety and security COVID moment. But the way that I'm constructing a team to really lean in is to target the near and the far side of the equation. At Ford, we were already thinking about future of work with our campus master plan. And then COVID came to the door, and we took a pause because, we were basically coming to end of schematic design on that. And the question was asked from Jim Hackett, who's just resigned as our CEO, have we made all of the right decisions? So we put together a think tank of international thought leaders, including anthropologists, ethnographers, neurologists, behavioral psychologists, people to really help us understand how we might behave on the back end of COVID, even when virus is not around us. I always say, what will be the residual behaviors that stay with us? What will be those that we cast away as we move forward? And what will be the conditions afforded to us as a result of COVID? And then kind of give it a rethink. So that's what we're doing right now. And we're using this as an opportunity to take the good stuff and apply it to this future context.
I think that's so powerful, and the ultimate design challenge, right? That you're looking at not just the basic needs of safety and security for people, but the very long-term needs that will transform what society looks like. Amy, how are you thinking about this at Gensler?
Well, Gensler's thinking about it similarly to Ford, where there's the now, the near, and the future. So thinking about designing solutions or strategies that consider the time horizon is definitely critical because the context changes everything. But you specifically asked, Michelle, what does brand innovation look like in the context of work? And the way we think about that at Gensler is beyond the design of the physical space. So there's really three things. So it's about how to create engagement with and between employees. It's about encouraging some of these new behaviors. And then the third thing is really about facilitating a new way of working. We're all at this point accustomed to what it's like to work in a virtual environment, but we've really challenged ourselves to explore some new tools as it relates to collaboration.
I love that. Just yesterday, Dropbox announced that we're going virtual first, which means that we're going to optimize for remote work, but get together when things matter most. And for those right engagements and special reasons, we'll bring people together for in-person experiences. I think that's a big bet on the future because we don't know what's going to happen. One of the constraints that the pandemic has introduced is that we have to reimagine the strategies, which you're describing as, now, near, and future. That's one time horizon. I bet there's a lot of other mental models and how you're working and thinking about these things. We're working at home. Some say we're living at work. How do you think about your audiences? Because so much is at play right now. Maybe, Amy, you want to take this first pass around, how do you prepare for the future way of working when all of the context is dynamic right now?
Sure. So, as it relates to preparing for the future of work, we have a number of audiences, right? I think while we're talking about employees, mostly, employees are also consumers. And like you said, there's this blur between home life and work life. I think, Jen and I, when we were pre-chatting, we were talking about which generation we're designing for because all of them want different things. And we both have children under 10. And so, of course, we're balancing what it's like to be a working mother at home. And, of course, it also starts to put us in the head of the next generation, so beyond Gen Z to Gen Alpha. And what will our children want in the workplace? They're not even there yet. So how do we start to imagine this experience that we're having right now has to make a strong impression on them. So in the future, when they enter the workplace, what might they want? And, a couple things that we should get into over the course of this conversation is, obviously people are looking for purpose and meaning in their work. You see people doing a lot of thinking, making some big, bold changes right now. And people are also thinking about how can I bring, or why is diversity so important, particularly in the design field, to thinking about our future and making sure we get multiple points of view.
Yeah, so powerful. Jen, I wonder, with the think tank that you're putting together, how are you thinking about these new generations and what can you tell us about, what should we know about the future? I would love to hear from you.
Well, we start with the known parameters. So here are some knowns for us. We have a lot of audience members. So, if we sort of flip the nomenclature of that and think about our stakeholders or our users, who are our stakeholders? We have our workforce or our employees who we care for very much. And we have a global workforce. So we have people all over the world with different cultural nuances or different cultural considerations to think about. We have customers. So we've got a retail audience to think about. We have community members, in the context of the train station, the Michigan Central development that we're building out right now. We have the Detroit community that we need to care about deeply. So all of that sort of rolls up to this think tank in this new COVID state. This is a lot of responsibility to think through. So when we're thinking through these problems, we're asking the question, what does this new world order afford us? Back to the previous question. And we've categorized this as, what are our new non-negotiables? Think laterally across that group. One more fact I forgot to state. In the next 10, and this is an important one. In the next 10 years, Ford Motor Company's workforce will turn at a rate of 60%. So imagine that. Imagine all of our workforce turning over, which means we'll have a younger, more nimble, new value proposition, whole workforce. We've got a new set of values to account for, to champion. Never mind that we have conceivably 5 generations all working together. So we kind of come at this as a shared value proposition. I'm sure Amy will nod at this, which is, this is a first, that we've got 5 generations conceivably working together under one roof. So we have to look at this and align what are our shared values. So in this post-COVID FAR state, we ask, what are the new non-negotiables? And what we're learning so far on the outside of our think tank is that things like wellness, these are kind of simple things that we probably hinted at before, we knew before, but now we would fight for them. We would say, in a post-COVID world, we all know now the new non-negotiable. We're going to fight for that one. Everybody will believe that wholly. An idea around systemic resiliency is probably a new non-negotiable. So we're generating this kind of list of things that we believe will be present in any context, be it retail, community building, workplace, wherever, for any generation. This is our new shared value system.
Yeah, this is the ultimate human-centered design, right? Is that
yes,
we're
looking at humanity
at the center of what we're doing?
Mm-hmm.
So I think what's interesting about what you're describing is that, employees really are a super important audience to this work, and they sometimes they can even double as our consumers. When you do culture building work, you do the inner work first, and then that transpires out into the brand. They can be our biggest advocates sometimes. So what are the important things to consider when designing for new employee experiences, building on the non-negotiables that you mentioned, Jen?
Do you want to take this, Amy, or do you want me to?
Oh,
I feel like we should play ping pong.
I'll frame it up because I do think, as it relates to employer brand, this is a really, really hot topic with our clients. So, the way to think about it is, companies have been so focused on communicating their brand value or their value proposition to consumers that there's been a little neglect on the employee side, and so they're a little less adept at figuring out how to do that. So this is, true for workers or employees at all stages. So, think about the war for talent and recruit, all the way from recruitment to retention, as well as, developing future leaders of our companies. So even if you segment the population of workers or employees beyond the generations, but actually where they're at in their career and the options they're considering, the brand of the employer becomes really important. So just to build on what Jen was saying related to shared values, it's an opportunity for companies to stand for something and to really talk about what those values are, so that not to make everyone carbon copies of one another, but just to be on the same page, as Jen was saying, about how we make decisions through the filter of what. So health, resiliency, whatever it may be, but really defining what those are as part of your brand.
Yeah, I see that as potentially giving people a shared purpose, which we know is the biggest motivator for smart people in the world. So I'm curious, like, how does that bridge for you, Jen, when you think about, you know, you're in a mobility company thinking about the future of many factors. What does that look like in your world?
It's really interesting, even how Ford Motor has moved into this state of mobility in the last few years. Thanks in part to Jim Hackett, I think the visionary leadership of Jim Hackett, now Jim Farley. So to ask the question, what does it mean to be a mobility company? We're really moving into a state of being a technology company. Like everything, it forces you to ask big questions, like what does that mean? What position does that put you in? To be a technology company, mobility company really is about bridge building, is about human connectivity again. I think in every state we are in this position, this magical position to connect people, to literally connect people. And so as we, come back into our physical space, then we have that obligation to really manifest our brand in space, in the physical environment. So, for us, we believe that we are in the business of human connectivity or human connections. So, as we think into how are we going to harness our superpower and really be our brand, like in the context of a retail environment, that's what we're going to talk about. That's what we're talking about now, is constructing meaningful relationships and building on this thing like trust, which is, a core element of our brand, and make sure that we talk about that in every piece of our physical spaces. So it's like what Amy is saying, like to do something truthful, elemental, but really authentic.
Yeah, I would love to hear how you're thinking about that in the digital context, because with the new, crisis and COVID constraints, like we're having to do what you're talking about in virtual spaces. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what the virtual connection what impact the virtual connection has on our culture. It's just one layer in all of the complexity that you're navigating.
So, Amy, do you want to start, or do you want me to jump in?
Sure. In many ways, of course, it's challenging to feel emotionally connected when you're not physically together. I think we all recognize that's those relationships are a little bit strange right now, having to connect virtually. But in some ways, digital or virtual connection really enhances culture. And so there's a number of ways that plays out. So let's think near future, as we become more interested in touchless solutions for obvious reasons, our personal devices will become, really, really critical to how we interact. So how can we take that to the next level and think beyond practical tools to find your way, for example, to ways to find your colleagues, or ways to find the town hall, any number of events that might be happening at your place of work that help connect you with people. So we see a real opportunity in what digital tools can do to connect us as a culture.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. Even thinking about the new signals and wayfinding that we have today, you can obviously see my eclectic style that maybe didn't translate to my office desk. And we're getting new information and signals about each other that in some ways is richer than it's ever been. And in other ways, we're missing out on some of those foundational elements of office life that we've relied on for however many generations we've been in the office. Jen, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think about the virtual layer to our work, and how it applies to your space?
I have to be honest, I'm kind of two minds on this topic. So on the one hand, we addressed this one in our think tank, and we've landed on a term that we're calling phygital space. Sorry for the funny word. you all can crib it if you want, but Phygital is obviously the seamless integration of physical and digital. And so, the idea is that we have this total fusion of hybridized space where we've got, those who are potentially in a physical space in some future state and those who are digitally present. And so we're preparing ourselves for that new world. Right now, I think a lot about the things that we're missing. So I think we've done really well. Since March, let's say. I think people adapted very quickly. Those of us in creative industry, flipped to platforms like Miro and others so that we could start to, charrette and make innovative work like we would have physically. But there are still things that we're missing, like the physical cues that we give one another when we're establishing trust, like the way that our bodies sort of move and the way that we construct those meaningful relationships I was just talking about. We're missing that, and we'll never achieve that through our plastic screens. That said, back to the other side, we have leveled out issues around hierarchy. Everybody is equal on the screen. And so, you have to sort of wait for everybody to speak. There's nobody in the room who is the alpha or the person presenting to everybody else. I kind of like that. That's gone. So now we have a different kind of platform where everybody potentially has an equal voice. So this is interesting. I think there's a bit of a cultural shift happening because of this.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I wonder, what are the values that you think we will carry through? Because there's this virtual transition that is more inclusive and more equitable. There's new value we're driving through our brands and new values that we're having to elevate. What do you think, or what personal values do you think will change the physical landscapes and culture?
Jen, you go ahead on this one.
I think we're going to take some of this with us when we come back together in the physical space. We think a lot about what I'm describing, like leveling out hierarchy. But really what I'm talking about is like active and passive engagement and the way that we behave in, say, a conference room environment. This is a great example. To integration of digital or tech, if we've been running an experiment with our tech team where if we apply tech to 2 walls instead of 1 wall, which is a single point of discussion, and we invite in people who are at another location, like for us, folks in Buenos Aires or in Chennai, India or something. And then we sort of measure out their viewing angles so that they can participate equal to those present. So everybody has sort of an equal point of view and can participate equally, contribute equally. Then again, we've leveled out hierarchy. Regardless of if you're present physically or digitally, we're all equal in the room. And nobody's at essentially the pulpit anymore. Nobody's speaking at. This is good. This is a totally different state of participation. And so I think now that we're all kind of comfortable here together, like we are right now, all of us in this forum, will be with us and maybe be more encouraged to participate actively in this new state of being. This is a good thing.
I wholeheartedly agree. Amy, how is this showing up in your space?
Well, first of all, I've never thought about it the way Jen just articulated. So I'm going to think about that more. You're right. It does level the playing field in terms of inviting all voices. And there's something about the screen connection that doesn't make you defer to the head in the room. So super interesting as it relates to equalizing, our workforce. I was thinking of something totally different related to this question in terms of maybe one way to think about it is we've been living in, and maybe we can go back 10, 20 years, what I think of as, an age of abundance. Mm-hmm. And now that our context is changing, I'm thinking about this as an age of smart choices. So when we have unlimited resources, when we learn that time is finite and that we want to use our time wisely. It's just forced a lot of us to really think about how do we scrutinize ourselves and each other around making smarter choices for individuals, for the world. And so I think as it relates to values transformation, that's what's standing out to me right now.
Yeah, that's so powerful. So I think I have one more big question for you, and then I'd love to move from the big keynote ideas to some of the more tactical stuff with our Q&A. But the last big question I'll ask you is, what should brands actively be doing today to set up this new future, this purpose-driven, equitable future that we're describing? Jen, do you want to go first?
Well, I'll tell you what I have learned this year so far. Like so far, it's not done yet. God help us. We actually have a couple more months of 2020 to go. So what I have learned so far is to construct a thoughtful framework. And this is really what I would wish to share with my colleagues, is to just slow down and thoughtfully lean into these problems. When I say problems, I really mean challenges. These are really big questions that have been put upon us this year. Like COVID is one. Of work obviously comes with that, but this moment of social justice, which is very critical, which actually layers onto this because it really becomes an issue of social emotional safety altogether. But I have learned that the pressure is to act quickly and provide an answer. What's the answer? What do the metrics say? What does the data say? And the temptation is to answer. Well, the data says this. Here's the answer. That is not the answer, actually. The answer is to slow down and formulate a response using, the thought leaders or the resources around you. And that's not necessarily the popular response, so that takes courage. But that's what I'd say. Slow down and, sort of find your voice as a brand and, reconcile your answer uniquely, and then lean into the problem.
The probably highest pressure and most exciting design problem to have, right? Which is we're getting to define the future in a way that we don't have a playbook for. And so in this moment, our brand innovators really are going to shift the narrative and the way that we do our work, which I think is a lot to do and a lot to take on, but also just endless opportunity for us as creative people. Amy, what's your thought? I know you care so much about belief systems, and I think that is a major theme in what we're talking about today. Tell us what people should be doing to get ready for the new future.
Sure. I mean, I'm talking with a lot of brands, and they're asking for that playbook, like you said, that doesn't exist because none of us have done this before, so it's all speculative. But one thing that you can do is, I say, dust off your manifestos and really roll up your sleeves and think about what you stand for, because there could be things that we want to leave behind. Pre-COVID. So really looking at that value system, evaluating what you want to bring with you into the future. The time is now. We're never going to get this time back. We all know that. So that giving your work meaning and purpose, as well as making sure that drives your brand and your brand value proposition, and that it's clear to everyone, is so critical.
Yeah, I love the way that you have this duality in your sort of mental model around this work, that you have to do it, make it real internally first, and then push it out through the brand. And I think that's when you really do get work that reinforces your beliefs, and then it becomes very true for people who interact with your brand. Yeah. So we have some really great questions from the audience, and if you're in the audience, please submit your questions in the Q&A box, and I'll ask them as they come up. But I think we're going to shift the conversation a little bit more into the tactics and some of the real life brand innovator work that we're seeing today. The first question comes from Isabel, and she asks, how does your marketing differ for reach out of the under 30 consumers entering the workforce? Jen, I think you described it really eloquently with a 5-generation workforce. What does that look like for you right now?
It's sort of what I was talking about before. For our under 35 workforce, I mean, we're identifying priorities, full stop. So, as we're designing our new campus, we're consciously ensuring that we're building into it, a new model of working. Assuming that this is in the FAR framework, without applying the findings of our think tank just yet. So stay tuned on that. But we had already thought through a fitness model. We had, even starting with the external landscape, we had committed to a restorative model for the landscape master plan, which was actually taking the landscape back to its original ecological footprint and, laying down footpaths, for outdoor activity and walking meetings and little pavilions placed out in the landscape. This is like a totally different way of working for Ford Motor Company, but we were consciously thinking about a younger workforce and the ways in which they would, want to come to us in Dearborn, Michigan. What would be appealing? What would keep them with us? So I would say a radical shift for Ford Motor Company, and really beautiful, very sustainably focused.
I think that's so powerful. And I think what we're hearing is that the new value set that younger generations bring into the workforce actually motivate us to invest in completely different spaces than we would have invested in before.
Yes. Yeah, well said. Thank you, Michelle.
Amy, what do you think? I feel like at Gensler you can view into other cultures and the companies that you work with and help transform through employee engagement and internal programming. What are you seeing for a younger generation of workers, and what are they needing from you?
Let's see, we talked about this a little bit, but if I may, it's so bold to say that I do think there are the generation before us. There might be a bias towards moving quickly, taking action, decisiveness. And so to Jen's point about it's going to take courage to do the opposite, which is say, pause, think about what's happening here. Let's evaluate, a few points of view before decisive action. I think that's going to be really critical to our future leaders too, to be able to demonstrate that they're listening and they're learning and they're taking in multiple inputs. I think that's what our future leader looks like.
Thinking about just us working in design and some of the truisms that we hear, I think we're going from, based on what you're saying, a more is more model to a less is more model potentially as we make the shift. And hopefully that inspires some really innovative thinking for what's to come. The next question asks, what effect do you think the Gen Z generation will have on corporations and brands as they move into leadership in the next 20 to 30 years? We're seeing new values. What do you think those values will sort of transform when this generation is in a position of leadership? Or what do you hope to see?
I sort of already answered that one. Jen, do you have another point of view?
The obvious answer is that this is a huge cultural shift. So let's just look statistically at the inevitable. We're hoping that there'll be a major, shift in equity and diversity. So let's hope that, the C-suite start to look a little bit more like our population. That's my hope. Anyway, I'm going to fight for that. That we see more women, that we see more, just diversity across the board. So, and that will inevitably bring perspective. And so, yeah, look, our corporations are going to look, feel, act very different generationally as we move through this. And that's just simple statistics. So I look forward to it. This was not the case for us when we started working even 25 years ago. This was, I even think back to just being a woman, in corporate industry and how difficult it was at the beginning. And I'm hoping that is something we don't talk about anymore. I'm very excited for Gen Z and Gen Alpha to start to grow up inside of this system.
Same here. I couldn't agree.
I can't wait to pass the torch.
I can't agree with you more. I lead the Women in Design group at Dropbox, and right now we're a group of people who are pushing on all boundaries to make sure that today, in the next round of reviews, we're equitable for everyone. And then the next set of hires, that we have more underrepresented minorities and women applying for these jobs. And it takes a very tactical and strategic approach to do that today, with the intention that, like you say, we hope to not have to argue about it in the future. And it's very meaningful work that will we'll be so much more creative with more people in the room. The next question is pretty specific about the tactics of our work. It asks, many brands have drastically reduced media budgets over the past few months. How have your media plans adjusted? And what are you thinking about in the very short term around this?
Yeah, so neither of us really do media buying. At least I don't think you do media buying, but we do work with either clients or partners in marketing communications who are making decisions about their budgets. So I think we all saw that, April to June timeframe, something like that, everyone constricted and pulled back. But now that things are loosening up a little bit more, it's more about trade-offs, less that the budget's down overall and more prioritizing where to spend the marketing dollars. So less an answer related to media plan and more just marketing communications budgets at large.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The next question builds on this a little bit, but it gets back to the culture in some ways. They're asking if we're seeing any behavioral changes with, being at home, social distancing with our brands. How are we seeing people engage with our brands differently right now? I think we've talked a lot about kind of reforming the brand or pushing the brand forward, but what kind of response are you seeing?
In terms of how people are engaging with brands? Mm-hmm. Gosh, there's so many examples. I think, and because I work in brand development, it's easier to think this way than this way, right? Which is that I think everyone is looking for that silver lining, meaning that optimism goes a long way. And so we're trying to take, a series of very challenging events and turn them into opportunity. I think that's the biggest thing. So whatever way the conversation is going, that's what brands and consumers want to talk about is how do we see the positive in all of this and how do we change for the better?
I think that's totally right. Even at Dropbox, we haven't been called on to comment on social justice movements before, but it was really important for us as a company to put a stake in the ground in what we believed in. And as a brand, we had to figure out how do we say that as the Dropbox voice. And one of the big things that really helped our team show up in the right way in that moment was that across the company and including the CEO, we collectively donated $2 million to Black Lives Matter. And if you asked me 3 years ago, would this be part of your brand strategy? No, definitely not. But in the moment of need, we were able to sort of motivate and orient ourselves to what we believed in, going back to those belief structures that you've both talked about, and say yes in the moment where it was obvious that we needed to say yes. And so I think that there is a lot of interplay with society and brand, more so than ever before, and it's far beyond consumption. It's going back to what you're talking about around belief systems.
Yeah, a lot of volunteerism. And I don't want to take it to activism, but just participation. People want to be part of the conversation and do something, or even if they don't do something, they want to listen and participate and engage. It's had a lot of positive impact.
That's right. Next question asks, how can marketing and technology leaders structure their teams and recruit highly coveted talent for a new era that demands increasing array of skill sets? So Amy, maybe you take this, and Jen, I would love to hear what the think tank is thinking about it, but there's a new dynamic workforce. So how should we, apply that to our internal org design or internal strategies?
Oh, team structure. I think about this a lot in terms of what makes great teams. Really fortunate, at least in my role in practice at Gensler, that I get to work with, 20 different teams at once, and the makeup of the teams are very different. So it's operationally challenging. Think of the calendar alone and how many work hours we have in the week and how to make all those people's calendars line up. But the diversity of the teaming really creates exceptional results, because it's less about doing what you did last time that worked well, and it's less about efficiency and more about creation. So just making sure we have a thinker in the mix. I mean, there's all different types of designers at Gensler, so multidisciplinary, I would say, is definitely a huge theme. And then as it relates to, I think the specific question was around recruitment of coveted talent. I mean, sure, now's the time, because people are evaluating just satisfaction in their current role. It's a great time to have conversations with multiple organizations, whether that's recruiting talent or just partnering together to do something exceptional.
Yeah, I think that's great. And Jen, how are you thinking about like org design and talent strategy, maybe in the near or even the future? What's your take on it? I'm curious to hear.
I love this question. It's a good question. And actually, my answer is something that I'd put in that new non-negotiable column that I mentioned earlier on in our conversation. So in our think tank, we had Tim Brown, who's from IDEO. I'm sure you all know who he is. And we spoke with him about this idea of coalition building a lot. And so the idea of a coalition, or we'll say movement of the idea of a collaborative team into a coalition, became a pervasive theme. So we believe that we're now in this broadened state of coalition building. This is important because it's really about a total exchange of information, or relinquishing control of information, and inviting in external agency. So inviting in others, cultural change moment. I mean, this is kind of a big deal, right? Now you're opening the doors and letting others into your space. And there's a free flow of information. Like Amy has just stated, with the target of solving the bigger problem collectively for the greater good. So I think in this future state, we really are looking for people who have a willingness to participate in this idea around the coalition, which is like active participation and a willingness to kind of free flow, amongst teams. And the people who participate are not kind of like the usual suspects. I mean, you heard me talk about anthropologists and sociologists and medical professionals and others. Well, look at our BLM moment, we've got community builders that need to come in and help us learn. We have others that just need to lead us through. So this is, I'd say, a radical shift in team building.
Yeah. I see it and feel it, and wish I were in some of those rooms that you're in with all of the multidisciplinary thinkers, because I think we're all asking ourselves these questions right now. And the more diversity of thought and input we can get, the better we can orient ourselves towards a smarter future.
Yes.
This next question kind of builds on what you're saying, Jen, and the question sets it up that there are 5 generations in the workplace and everybody learns differently. You're describing this context where we're going to work differently. How do we help people transition, or how do we teach them to work in the new ways as we go through this massive cultural shift? Where does learning and development or training reinforce some of those things that you're talking about?
I'm glad you asked that question too. So this is a personal answer now. I actually think that we need to be working with our educational institutions, kind of go as far upstream as possible to start building core curriculum in design schools, whatever that design curriculum is, and start teaching, things like business, but problem solving, design thinking in this new way so that our students are prepared to jump in. And that's what we're doing.
I totally agree. And I know that I'm a minute over. So Amy, if you have any closing thoughts on this, I'd love to wrap up with you.
Well, I'm playing with a yellow crayon here on the side. I was trying to grab a highlighter, and then I thought, oh, this is an innovation, meaning this is a time to grab whatever tool you can and think about how to innovate and not just fall back on learned behaviors. It's a really exciting time. So thanks for tuning in.
Jennifer, Amy, you're both so brilliant, and I can't wait to see the impact that your thinking has on the future of work. Thanks for the conversation today.
Yeah, thank you to all 3 of you. It was really great also hearing all the things Dropbox is doing. Of course, as we use Dropbox very often at Brand Innovators, but also, of course, Gensler and Ford. So thank you so much, Amy and Jennifer and Michelle, for joining us today. It was really awesome conversation. Hope to see you back soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Well, a quick reminder to all of our